Hi, I'm Jazmin, and this is Not Another PD. It's for helping professionals who are tired of theoretical training that doesn't translate to the work you actually do. Here, we talk boundaries, leadership, systems, and how to protect your well-being while doing complex work every day. I'm so glad you're here. Episode 33. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest has been on the podcast twice before. So if you haven't listened to those earlier episodes, I will add the link to the show notes so you can go back where we were first introduced to today's guest and what we're going to be exploring. So it's a little bit more casual. It's a conversation or a series of essentially the podcast episode came to be because this guest and I have a lot of conversations back and forth about moving from being an employee to running your own business as a helping professional. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges, some of our key tips, and just get inside the brilliant brain of Jess Marsh. Jess, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you back.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to be back. Last conversation I just absolutely love. So it's such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. When I was thinking of my bio, I think about when we are in meetings as helping professionals, and so often I notice when people go around the room, they'll say, I'm a social worker, I'm a psychologist, I'm whatever the title is. So I thought I'd change it up a little bit today and introduce myself as Jess. And Jess is someone who loves working with people, and I'm a dog mum. And I love walks and good food. But in my day to day, I am a social worker and I own my own private practice called Be With. So in Be With, I do clinical supervision with helping professionals, whether that's one-on-one or in groups.
It's amazing, and it's so nice to actually get to know the person behind the professional role. And Jess, before you were a social worker, you had a really interesting profession. What did you used to do before you became a social worker?
When I was at school, there is so much pressure on knowing what we want to do. And I knew I always loved helping people, but I actually started out doing aviation. So I started studying as a pilot, and then I did that for a number of years and realized it wasn't aligned with where I wanted to be. And so here I am now as a social worker.
That's so interesting, Jess. And before I became a social worker, I worked in the financial services sector. So I worked in banking, I worked in superannuation, which anyone who knows me think that's highly ironic because maths is not my strong suit. So when I tell people, yes, I did used to work in finance, they're like, I don't know how that fits. But we all bring so much like previous experience to our roles now in the helping professions, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think, like I said before, there's so much pressure on knowing when we're really young. But then as we realize what's aligned with what we actually want, it can look so different.
Definitely. And Jess, I wanted to also ask you, what when you first started your business Be With, is there anything that really surprised you that you didn't expect?
I pretty much had this really idealistic view of what private practice would be. It's you have the passion, you have the skills, and you go out and essentially referrals will just come to you and you can do the work that you love and you can choose the work that you do and you can choose your hours and be happy and comfortable. That was my kind of expectation of what private would be like.
It almost sounds too good to be true, right? When you frame it like that, you have all these skills and you just set up a clinic or you set up a website and then people just book in and it's almost stress-free. There's almost that myth that it is stress-free. And was there a moment when your preconception of what business would be look like to what reality was, and what was that like for you?
The whole journey of starting private, I just had no idea what to do. And I didn't necessarily realize how much went into private practice as well. The nuances of kind of even figuring out a name and being able to develop a website, figuring out accounting, doing social media, marketing yourself. And I didn't realize probably until I did a business consult actually. And someone said to me, like, okay, you're a business owner. And I was like, oh, wow, that doesn't actually align with my values as a social worker. And so when I noticed that kind of ethical conflict or the values conflict, I realized that maybe this is something that isn't end goal. I think for me, it was like, oh, this is end goal. This is kind of what everyone aspires to. I'm curious though for you, Jazz, what was it like for you?
Initially, when I started my business, I would have considered it a side hustle. So I was working full time in a government role and having my business on the side. And I started very small, just doing a bit of clinical supervision, individual, and then some groups as well. It was just something that I did on the side because I was really passionate about mentoring and supervising other people. So I don't think I really took myself seriously as a business owner for a very long time, because it was almost like this secret little side hustle that I didn't always feel comfortable sharing with everyone, because I was worried that I'd be judged by colleagues in the sector who didn't have those same business aspirations. And at the time, I did feel quite isolated because I didn't really know anyone else who had started a business.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone that I had worked with in the government roles, and they're amazingly passionate and dedicated about what they do. But what I noticed was that their career progression goals looked more like just moving up within that government space or within that organization that they're working for. So for me, I was doing something that was a little bit outside of the box and not traditional as a government social worker to actually want to go and do my own thing. Yeah. So I think there was often, like for me, there was that fear of, well, what if I stuff it up? But it was just something that I had on the side for quite a number of years, until I decided that I really was in a point where I needed to choose. Do I choose that traditional employee role and just keep working my way up within the government system and eventually getting up to some high executive level? Did I want that, or did I want a different path? Did I want a little bit more time freedom? And for me, when I started my business, it was all about wanting to spend more time with my family. I guess that was the values that drew me into my own business, was wanting to have more time freedom and more financial freedom as well. But something that I definitely struggled with was the mindset, going from employee, and not just any kind of employee, but a government employee for almost a decade. A government employee mindset is quite rigid. It can be inflexible. There's so many processes that you need to follow, so many procedures. There'd be rarely a scenario working in the government that there's not a policy or protocol that covers exactly the issue that's happening. So in terms of my creativity, I felt quite limited. And then making that shift from then that employee mindset to then being a business owner mindset. So that's something that even to this day, it's something that I'm regularly reflecting on. And I know for yourself, Jess, you've worked in many large organizations as well. What was it like for you going from that employee mindset to that business owner founder mindset?
I find it really tricky, to be honest with you, because I'm used to working in not-for-profit organisations, and so we're able to provide a high-quality service for people for free. And so people are able to have access to the support that they need and deserve. And so coming into private, like you said, we can create our own fees, but I am kind of stuck in that systemic mindset of I want to be able to give people support for free because it's expensive and life is really expensive now. So there are so many challenges that come up within that private space of like what ethically is important to me, but also if you are a business owner, you do need to make money so that you can afford to live and to continue to be able to support people in their journeys. So I find it a really tricky balance, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it definitely is. So that concept, that traditional model of private practice, when I hear that word, I tend to associate with a therapeutic practice, like a therapy clinic. But that term itself, I think, can be quite limiting because
Mm.
there's many helping professionals who don't do one-to-one therapy. What was that like for you when you decided to maybe step away from that traditional sort of private practice model and started actually like diversifying what products and services you offer to the professionals that you work with?
Mm. I offer a number of different services through my business. I do clinical supervision, leadership coaching, therapeutic consultancy, and counseling or therapy. And initially, I wanted to be able to position the business as providing clinical supervision and leadership coaching. That's the work that I really love to do. But I know it's not easy to just have my days filled with clients. And so then to be able to balance that, it felt important to then bring in other services to help scaffold. And what I found was counseling actually started to become really busy. But then I started to become, I guess, fatigued by marketing myself. And because I was doing really long days in counseling, I was starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and finishing at 6:30. At one point, I was juggling two jobs, working for a not-for-profit, and then myself as well. So I was fatigued, and then the parts of the work that I wanted to really focus on, I kind of felt a bit burnt out from and exhausted by positioning myself, marketing myself as a clinical supervisor on socials and things. It takes so much time. And I actually never really understood when I look at a reel on Instagram how long it actually takes. And for me, one reel
Yeah.
probably takes 2 hours. I don't know about you, but it's a lot of work.
It definitely is. And you bring up a really valid point there, Jess, around like the marketing side of business, because in our degrees, we don't get taught those business
No.
skills or those marketing skills. It's just sort of almost expected that we'll just kind of fumble it and work our way out, or actually then seek specialist consultation from business and marketing experts. And I was actually looking on Instagram yesterday and it came up on my feed. It was a reel of Cardi B, and she was recommending that everybody do some kind of business course. And her
Mm.
rationale was that regardless of what your profession is, there may come a time in which you want to do something different and you would like to bring those skills in whatever your profession is into starting your own business, but what will hold you back is not having the business skills. And then Cardi
Mm.
B said that she made that mistake where she didn't learn her own business skills, so now she hires business managers to actually run her businesses because she doesn't have that skill set, which is really a good reminder to all of us that it's not something that's covered in our degrees. And I really wish in every single degree they had some units in business and in marketing. Then that way we don't fumble so much when we first move into working for ourselves and be like, how do I make a reel? Like, what do I even post about? I don't know how to do it. And definitely, I mean, 2 hours to do one reel, that was definitely me when I started. It still takes me probably a lot longer than people whose like expertise is in business and marketing strategy. I'm definitely improving, but I've definitely invested in a lot of like business or marketing coaching. But there's so much that we don't know, I guess, when we come into business, and it is
Mm.
quite humbling, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a really big shock. And something that I noticed was I didn't even know what a reel was, Jazz. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And so that was a whole other learning which took so much energy again away from the parts of the business that I wanted to focus on. And then, of course, I would create a video and then I would overanalyze it. And so then there was parts of myself that I was working on as a therapist and as a clinical supervisor in terms of imposter syndrome, not feeling enough. But then I'm watching these videos back, which holds a mirror up to yourself essentially. And then I was feeling really insecure or kind of embarrassed about putting myself out there and having photos of myself, the areas that I wasn't feeling comfortable with. So I was having to really step out of my comfort zone. And that kind of exacerbated imposter syndrome within me, even though I thought it was more going to be centered around the therapy and feeling it in that space, it actually shifted into this other space, which I actually didn't expect.
That's so interesting. And one thing that I believe, one factor I think, Jess, that does hold people back to actually being able to feel confident to put themselves online as a business owner is sometimes that fear of, online trolls or that backlash from whether it's someone that they know or whether it's a complete stranger online. And there was one instance when I'd posted, I think it was in a Facebook group, and I wasn't selling any products or services. I was just sharing some insights that I thought might be helpful for other colleagues in the sector. And I remember receiving a really unpleasant anonymous contact via my website, and the person gave a fake email address. I did try to email them so I could invite them to have a discussion with me around what their concerns were. And this email contact that I received via my website was actually quite nasty, and I felt that it was definitely a personal attack on my character as well. I noticed that the more visible I became as a business owner on social media, then the more likely there was to have some, I guess, negative feedback and comments. And I guess, what are your thoughts on that, Jess, and whether you've had any sort of similar experience?
Even posting a picture of myself felt confronting. It wasn't something that I was used to. I don't really use social media personally. And so posting a photo felt confronting. And I think sometimes people have good intentions, but then also sometimes people are really critical. And in this day, there's a lot of expectation that people assume that you need to be perfect as well. And so I know there's been times where I've posted certain things where I thought me being brave about posting photos and feedback would be something that was putting myself out there and being really brave, but I'd received some comments or direct messages afterwards being like, hey, that's kind of unethical posting feedback. Don't know if you should do that. So for me, I really retreated from social media after that. And I was actually talking to someone this morning, and they had posted on Instagram a carousel, I think you call it.
Oh, yes,
And
carousel,
there
yes.
was
We've got to get you up with the lingo, Jess.
well, there was a spelling error in one of the carousel picture things. And essentially, they then felt like they needed to apologize to people and say, hey, I noticed that there's a spelling error. But I actually love that there was an error, because in this day and age, so much is AI and there's that human element that we're missing as well. And so I love when we are able to show up and be our authentic selves, but I think it takes a lot of bravery because people do expect a certain version of us on social media.
Yes, they definitely do. And I was speaking to a group of supervisees just last night, and we were sharing some things that I found that have been helpful to us in terms of mindset shifts. And one that I shared with my group was that done is better than perfect. And I think that especially applies to social media, because we should never have our content that looks too polished, because then people could think, yes, it's AI. I remember on one of my first podcast episodes, there was an editing mistake. So I do all my own editing for the podcast at this time. Maybe eventually when the situation allows, then I could outsource, but I do it myself. And so normally I don't listen to the full podcast episode from start to finish. I sort of edit it as best I can, and then I release it. But for some reason, something made me listen to this podcast episode when I was at the gym. So I had my AirPods in, I was doing my workout, and I heard myself. So sometimes if I'm recording, whether it's a solo episode or a guest, and I've realized, okay, I've stuffed something up, I want to cut it out, I'll say cut. And then that way, when I'm editing it, it saves me time because I can do a keyword search for the word cut. Although now that I'm saying this, it's going to mess with my mind when I'm doing the editing. But when I listened to this podcast episode, there was I was talking and then I said, oh, cut. And then I was talking again and I'd missed out on that cut. Mm-hmm. The episode had already gone live and I'd already had some feedback saying that they found the episode helpful and people had rated the episode. And I was in two minds. Do I take down the whole episode and then have to fix the editing and upload it again? Mm-hmm. Or do I just leave it and actually practice what I preach, and done is better than perfect approach? And I actually left it. So, and I don't know which episode it is to say to people, hey, listen to that and you'll hear it. It might have been one of the episode 1 potentially when I was still learning about the editing software. But I just thought, I'm just going to leave it, because then if one of our colleagues is listening to that and actually has aspirations in the future to start a podcast but thinks, oh, it's too hard, or I won't know what to do, or mine will never sound polished, and they hear that mistake in mine, then that could be like a motivator or encouragement for them just to do it anyway, because it is really about just getting some of these conversations out there. And even with this episode today, we don't really have a script. I mean, we've got some potential loose talking points, not that we've stuck to, but we just wanted to get this conversation out to our colleagues, right, Jess?
Yeah. Even in what you were just saying, Jazz, that feeling of what our expectations are versus reality, and even thinking about going private. Everyone was saying to me, it is the best thing you'll ever do. It's the best thing you'll ever do. No one ever talked about all of these things that we're speaking about today, the intricacies, what it takes to actually be a business owner who is also a helping professional. And I love that we are able to have this platform to be able to actually talk about, yes, there are so many amazing parts, but also there's so many challenges that are not spoken about. And I think sometimes people then internalize that and go, what's wrong with me? What am I not doing right? And I for sure have sat in that space for many, many months. And having people like you as peers, having regular supervision to help actually debrief and go, what am I doing? And how can I have a different lens? Because it's painted in a certain way or presented in a certain way to us where it is picture perfect. And so I love when you said done, not perfect.
I think it would be helpful for us to talk a little bit about any sort of tips for people. And what I will say is for people who are those absolute information gatherers like you and I, with our many degrees and courses and all the training, and we sort of overconsume content. What I always recommend, both for myself, what I do, because even though we're clinical supervisors, we also are supervisees, because we do also have our own clinical supervisors too. And something that I've found for myself, but also the clients I work with, is helpful is being really mindful of what point in the day you book your supervision. So if you know you're more energetic in the morning first thing, book it in then. If you know I'm not a morning person, I'm more peak late afternoon, okay, book your supervision at 2 or 3 p.m. So I think know where your energy levels are. And another thing is that if you've just had supervision or a reflective practice session or professional learning, don't then book a client immediately afterwards. Allow yourself time to actually sit with any reflections. If you do journaling, you might want to journal some prompts. But then if we just move from one thing to the next, we just get busy being busy, and then we never have time to sit with anything that would actually be helpful to enhance our practice. Is there any tips that you've found helpful either for yourself or in the clients that you work with?
The most important thing for me has been supervision, and even going into a space where I'm telling my supervisor about all the different learnings I'm doing and trainings and knowledge gathering. And she would say, Jess, that's a lot. And I was like, I know, but I just feel like I never know enough. And so being able to have someone reflect that back to you and validating that what you have is enough. I don't know whether there's enough emphasis in our work that us showing up and attuning to the person in front of us is enough. And then all the other wonderful tools and skills we have are bonuses in a way. So when I had that fresh perspective on what's actually important in this space and how do I connect with the person in front of me instead of constantly thinking about all the different trainings and modalities that I could use to integrate, I actually was then able to be more authentic in the space, and it took more pressure off of me because I was just able to be me as a human first and then a therapist. And even in supervision, being a human and then a clinical supervisor, I think is so important. And people then feel safe in the space where you can then start to do that therapeutic work. But until that relationship is built, often we can't do the work that we hope to do. And sometimes when we have all those wonderful trainings and theories we want to put into practice, if we focus on just implementing all of those things in practice, I often find that it takes away from the relationship, which matters most. So even though we feel like we're doing a really good thing to support our practice, sometimes it can take us away from what's really important.
Yeah, that's a really great reminder because we need to remember that the person in front of us, as I said, whether it's a supervision session, a therapy session, we need to remember that client is like the cornerstone for like everything that we're doing. Jess, we're almost at the end of our informal conversation. It'd be great to let people know, like, if someone wants to reach you, how can they find you? And do you have any exciting updates coming up?
You know, I do. I have been working on the leadership menu for almost 12 months now. It's taken such a long time because I really wanted to make sure that it's a helpful resource to people across a variety of practice contexts. So the menu complements the other menus that we have, which is the therapeutic practice menu. So that's designed for people working in therapeutic roles, particularly kind of counselling or that one-to-one space with people. And then the supervision menu, which is designed for clinical supervisors. So part of actually getting it off the ground for me was trying to make a big difference in the work that we do as helping professionals and how that then translates into our clients, the people that we're leading and supervising. And so often I hear still day to day that people are experiencing managers to not be supportive, they're experiencing workplace bullying, they're feeling unsafe at work. And I know you talk a lot about this, Jazz, but it needs to stop. And so this is my way of trying to support people to develop their practice and not to shame people, but genuinely to help support them to be better leaders. That is now available on my website, which is www.bewith.com.au. On there as well is contact us.
Thank you, Jess. And I'll link all that in the show notes as well. And I'm a huge fan of your supervision menu. I use it literally all the time. And I can't wait to get my little pause on your leadership menu as well. So I'm sure that will be absolutely amazing. So you're doing great work, Jess. And I can't thank you enough for joining me. And I'm sure we'll have to have you back for a fourth time. This is your third time lucky, but I'll have to, until we get sick of things to talk about, then I'll have to keep bringing you back on. Thanks so much, Jess.
Thanks, Jazz.
Thank you for joining me on Not Another PD. If this episode was helpful, and you'd like to find out more, you'll find ways to work with me in the show notes. And if there's a topic you would like covered or someone you think should be on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, clear boundaries don't just protect our clients, they protect us too.